Well, I haven't done one of these in like forever. My name is Omega Killer 44, and we're gonna do another top 10. I'm gonna do a couple of these every once in a while. Ow, freaking mother ballsack noodle. I'm gonna do one of these every once in a while. Okay. Here are the 10 worst landlords. Almost no one likes to rent. There are certainly enough rental horror stories out there, especially with cheap landlords who won't make necessary repairs to keep the grounds clean. But each of the following landlords took negativity to the next level and did their best to make life for their tenants as miserable as possible. They spied on them, harassed them, and demolished their homes, with the renters inside. A few of them even killed their tenants just to make a quick buck. Number 10. Kip and Nicole Macy. In 2005, Kip and Nicole Macy bought an apartment building in San Francisco. Their plan was to kick out the tenants, renovate the building, and sell the apartment units for profit. After they bought the building, the couple realized that they could not legally evict the building's residents. The Macys decided to force the tenants out by any means necessary, and they spent the next 17 months terrorizing their renters. The Macys threatened their tenants, stole from them, poured ammonia on their belongings, changed locks, boarded up windows, cut telephone lines, and shut off gas and power. The renters refused to leave, and they hired lawyers. Nicole Macy impersonated tenant Scott Morrow, firing his lawyer by email. Then, still impersonating Morrow by email, she threatened to kidnap and dismember the children of one of her own attorneys. One day you are going to come home and find your 3 children missing. And each day a package will arrive with a piece of them. You are effing with the wrong person. Morrow refused to leave, and the Macys grew angry. Kip Macy took a saw and attempted to saw up through the floor of Morrow's living room. Morrow and a friend were sitting on his couch when he saw the blade come out of the floorboards. Morrow grabbed a hammer and smashed the saw. The Macys realized that the tenants would never leave on their own, and the couple asked the building inspector how they could make the apartment complex unstable. They followed his instructions, and they had their workers cut load-bearing beams in the basement. The apartment building was declared uninhabitable, and the tenants were forced to leave. The Macys were arrested in 2008, but they were released on bail and fled to Italy in 2010. After almost 3 years, the couple was finally extradited back to San Francisco in 2013. They pleaded guilty to 4 felony counts, and they each received sentences of 4 years and 4 months in prison. Number 9. Lloyd Satchwell and Esme Notice. Esme noted in 1993, Esme Notice of Hartford, Connecticut, was most displeased that her tenants, Dwayne Wilson and Louis Mercer, withheld the rent to force her to make repairs on the house. Notice fell behind on her mortgage, and she had to use her own savings to make the mortgage payments on the duplex. She went to the couple, threatened them, and told them to move out. Notice was impatient for the couple to leave, and she decided to get rid of the tenants by getting rid of the building. She wanted the house burned to the ground so that she could collect on a $200,000 insurance policy. Notice tried to hire an acquaintance, Donnie Burton, to start the fire. She offered him $200 in crack, but Burton refused when he realized the house was occupied. Notice told her husband, Lloyd Satchwell, that Burton had refused to help them, and Satchwell decided to start the fire himself. A few days later, at midnight, Satchwell crept up to the duplex, coated the front porch in gasoline, and lit the building on fire. He drove away as the house went up in flames. 11 residents managed to escape the fire. However, Clarence and Barbara Winston and 2 of their grandchildren, Tina, age 3, and Josephine, age 1, died. Investigators smelled gasoline on Satchwell's car seat, and they detected gasoline on his clothes and in his bathroom. The couple was arrested. Notice pleaded guilty to a variety of charges, and she was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Satchwell was convicted of 4 counts of arson murder, and he was sentenced to 120 years imprisonment with no possibility of parole. Coming in at number 8 is Dorothea Puty, I have no idea. Dorothea P. first began running her boarding house in the 1970s. She became popular with Sacramento social workers, and she was willing to accept alcoholics, drug addicts, and other difficult clients into her home, which could sleep more than 24 tenants. Dorothea was caught forging the signatures of her tenants on their behalfs on their benefits checks and signing them over to herself. She was arrested and sentenced to 5 years probation, which barred her from operating a boarding house. Her probation was lengthened after she was arrested for theft. However, she soon reopened her boarding house. Federal probation officers visited her numerous times, but she managed to convince them that her tenants were friends or guests. Dorothea resumed her habit of taking in the sick and vulnerable and cashing their checks in her name. However, she wanted more money. Dorothea went to 2 different psychotherapists. I thought that said psycho-rapist. Psychotherapist and asked for tranquilizers to claim her tenants. Instead, she used the drugs to stupefy and kill her boarders. She continued to receive Social Security checks for her deceased victims, and she continued to take on new renters. She netted $5,000 a month. In 1988, a social worker began looking for a client who had disappeared and contacted the police. Homicide detectives visited Dorothea's house. Disturbed soil was observed in the background, and the police began to dig. They discovered 7 bodies buried in the background. Dorothea was convicted of murder, and she was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. She died in prison in 2011. Wow. Number 7, Maskia Imeda. He's Australian. Australian Masaki Imeda advertised cheap housing to Asian students in Sydney. He promised them a quiet and peaceful environment in which to live. In reality, Masaki was running a shantytown. He had several decrepit buildings crammed on one lot, including an abandoned bus, 2 sets of caravans piled on top of each other, and 3 shipping containers. Imeda had more than a dozen tenants, and they all shared one portable toilet. In 2014, a fire broke out in the neighboring industrial complex, and it spread to the Imeda's town. Firefighters arrived, and they decided to make sure no one was inside the buildings. They were surprised to discover the terrified occupants, but they managed to save all 13 of them before the fire engulfed the property. Imeda was charged with illegally using an industrial lot as a housing complex, and he was fined $147,705 US dollars. Imeda owned other properties, and he placed hidden cameras around one of them before he rented the home to a couple. The wife was browsing the internet when she found a Japanese website which warned that Imeda often installed hidden cameras in the bedroom. When her husband came home, she asked him to check their room. He found a camera in the light fitting, and the couple called the police, who discovered several more cameras. Imeda pleaded guilty to recording without consent in 2016. He was sentenced to 17 months in jail, which means he is out right now. Still, could possibly spying on people. You never know, there could be a camera in your room right now. There could be a camera in my room. Oh, wait, there is. I'm staring at one right now. Number 6, Ephraim Vazovsky. He's Russian. He's American. At least he lives in America. In 2014, I'm just going to call him by EV. EV bought an apartment building in Harlem and immediately began to get rid of the tenants. He offered the families a buyout, and they all took the money except one, a family of 7, which had lived in the top floor apartment for 14 years. EV decided to renovate the apartment anyway. He submitted falsified documents that claimed the building was unoccupied, and he hired workers to gut the apartment. His employees began to tear the building apart, an act which turned into a death trap. They tore up floors, leaving gaping holes. They removed structural walls, which nearly caused the roof to collapse, and they blocked the fire escape. EV turned off the heat during the winter, and temperatures dropped as low as minus 23 degrees Celsius, that is negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. The water froze in the apartment's toilet, and the family was forced to use the bathrooms at local restaurants. So the construction people didn't notice that they were walking out of their apartment? The family's 5 children, aged 1 to 12, had to sleep in their church to avoid freezing to death. The city inspected the building and discovered the unsafe conditions. The family was forced to move, and they were provided temporary housing by the Red Cross. Evie immediately pleaded guilty to reckless endangerment and endangering the welfare of a child. He was sentenced to 20 days of community service, and he agreed to forfeit $350,000. He endangered the welfare of a child and got 20 days in prison? You serious? That's attempted murder, if you think about it. Going to number 5 is Greg and Derek Brown. They are twins. Wow. Oh my goodness, they are twins, dude. You can't even tell who's who. After Brianna Bauer's son tested positive for lead poisoning in 2013, Cleveland public health officials contacted the Brown brothers and told them that the apartment had to be inspected. Derek Brown, right above, responded by calling Bowers and said that he was going to kick her door in and mess her up. Instead, he shut off her electricity, changed the locks before she could move out, and kept her stove, refrigerator, television, and baby photos. Bowers was not the only tenant who was harassed by the Browns. Greg and Derek Brown would often rent to single women and single mothers because they were easier to control and intimidate. They frequently locked them out of their homes with nails or superglue, threatened them, broke into their units to steal clothes, toys, and family treasures, cut their electrical lines, and turn their water off. The brothers managed to avoid repercussions for years, although they racked up millions of dollars in court judgments and thousands of dollars in delinquent property taxes and late fines. Warrants were repeatedly filed against the 2 men after they failed to appear for court hearings. The Browns used aliases, and various company names and addresses to avoid prosecution. Greg Brown was finally jailed after he physically assaulted a tenant. He had threatened her, stuck her in the back with a wooden bat before running down the driveway with the home's electric meter. In 2018, Greg was sentenced to 6 months in prison, 500 hours of work service, and 5 years of probation. He also had to get his homes inspected and get on payment plans for the fines and taxes he owed. Number 4, Lawrence J. Myers. Lawrence Myers was having difficulty paying the mortgage on his Chicago apartment building, and he decided to cash in on his $250,000 insurance policy. He hired his maintenance man, Lauren Andre Comer, to burn down the building. Comer mixed gasoline and oil to hide the smell, and at 6:30 a.m. on Valentine's Day 2010, he started a fire on a couch in an empty unit on the first floor. The fire spread quickly and blocked the only staircase to the second floor. 7 of the building's occupants died from carbon monoxide poisoning. The victims were aged 3 days to 20 years. Witnesses overheard Myers and Comer discussing the fire, and they contacted the police. Authorities placed recording devices on one of the witnesses, which recorded the duo talking about what they had done. A jury only took 90 minutes to convict Myers of 7 counts of murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole in 2014. The judge presiding over the case said she would have sentenced Myers to death if Illinois still had the death penalty. Number 3, Aaron and Joel Israel. I swear to God. Their name is Israel and they're Jewish. Isn't that weird? Their name is Israel and they're Jewish. Amaron, aka Aaron, and Joel Israel owned apartment buildings in Brooklyn, and they wanted to replace their rent-controlled tenants with residents who could pay more money. The renters would not leave, so the brothers hired people to harass their tenants. Between 2010 and 2014, the Israel's thugs patrolled the buildings, halls with pit bulls, baseball bats, and sledgehammers. And they invited random people to use drugs in common areas. The Israels sent letters to the tenants requesting access to their apartments to make repairs. A worker arrived the next morning, armed with a sledgehammer and an electric saw, and he spent hours destroying the kitchens and the bathrooms. When he finished, the tenants could see the building's basement through the remnants of their kitchen floor. The Israels realized that they could not force the tenants to move. They paid someone for information how to damage their structure that the city would order the tenants to vacate. Soon the building's utilities were vandalized, and the city ordered all the tenants to move out. The tenant protection unit became suspicious of the brothers. Hold on. Sorry. Sub opened their records and sent the cases to the district attorney. The brothers pleaded guilty to engaging in a scheme to defraud, as well as 3 counts of unlawful eviction. They were sentenced to 5 years probation and 500 hours of community service. They also had to pay nearly $250,000 to 8 tenants in sums ranging from about $12,000 to $68,000. Number 2, Thomas Daly. In 2008, one of Thomas Daly's tenants asked her boyfriend to change a light bulb in her bathroom, and he discovered a small video camera hardwired into the wall. They called the police, who found another camera in her bedroom. Police opened an investigation, and they discovered that Daly, who primarily rented to single women, had 32 more cameras throughout his Norristown, Pennsylvania apartments. Cameras, some with audio capability, were hidden behind screws in bathrooms. Were hidden behind screws in bedroom ceiling fans, behind pinholes in walls, behind faucets in bathtubs, and behind doorbell chimes. Some of the cameras were turned on when a tenant turned the lights on. Others Daly could control at will. Daly ultimately admitted to videotaping 34 tenants over a 20-year span. He was sentenced to 4 to 10 years in prison. He was also ordered to pay more than $1.5 million to the 17 tenants he secretly spied on. He was forced to sell his apartments to pay the fines. And coming in at number 1 is Stephen Croman. Stephen Croman spent decades buying and flipping rented-controlled Manhattan apartment buildings. Rent control. Croman would buy the buildings cheap, and he would have his employees remove the apartment's occupants. Croman's employees referred to the tenants as targets, and they competed to push out the most. The employees received a bonus for each tenant they forced out. If his tenants refused to move, Croman resorted to harassment. He turned their buildings into hazardous construction sites, avoided making repairs, and cut off heat, electricity, and hot water. His companies repeatedly filed baseless lawsuits against tenants. One tenant was brought to court 11 times, even though she was not behind on the rent. Another tenant racked up $240,000 in legal fees. If tenants still refused to leave, Croman would use his secret weapon. Anthony Falconite, a retired police officer. Falconite would propose as a repairman, a building manager, and a delivery man, or an inspector, get into people's apartments. Once inside, he would accuse tenants of illegally occupying units, demand their identification, and take their photographs without permission. Then he would stalk them, confronting them at work, and even following them out of state. After his tenants were removed, Croman routinely ignored construction laws and performed work without permits more than 175 times. Croman's shoddy workmanship and his bogus paperwork drew the attention of officials, and he was charged with grand larceny and tax fraud. In 2017, he pleaded guilty and was ordered to pay $5 million tax settlement and $8 million to his former tenants. Croman was also sentenced to 1 year in jail. So if you enjoyed this video, and if you know any tenant that is terrible at doing his job, people need to step up, okay? Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Peace.